In any negotiation, any relationship, any room you walk into, an invisible psychological law is at play. Power doesn't reside with the loudest voice or the deepest pockets. Absolute power belongs to the one person genuinely willing to walk away. The moment you require nothing from the environment, you strip the world of its leverage. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. The mind that needs nothing commands everything. Here is the architecture of absolute self-reliance. You feel it, don't you? The quiet humiliation under your skin, the meeting where you swallowed your opinion because you needed the paycheck, the relationship where you tolerated a tone you'd never accept from a stranger because you feared the silence on the other side, the client you laughed with when you wanted to correct them, the friend you texted first, again because the uncertainty was unbearable. You're too intelligent not to see the dynamic. You watched yourself bend in real time, and you knew exactly why. You needed something, and the moment you needed it, you handed over the keys to your kingdom. You were taught compromise is virtue, flexibility is wisdom, needing others is human. That wasn't a gift. It was a tactical installation, a system that needs you cooperative, doesn't need you sovereign. It needs you slightly hungry, slightly insecure, predictable. You weren't raised to be free. You were raised to be reliable. And now you're here, not by algorithm. Your pain brought you. The betrayed intellectual inside you finally asked the forbidden question. What would life look like if I genuinely needed nothing from anyone? Not the approval, not the promotion, not the relationship, not the validation. Stay with that question. In the next 20 minutes, you'll receive the complete Machiavellian blueprint for inner sovereignty, the psychological architecture that converts the ability to walk away into the most devastating form of leverage a human being can possess. Read that line again. He's not talking about titles. He's talking about you. No job, relationship, or opportunity has intrinsic value. It's honored only by the sovereign weight of the person standing inside it. The job doesn't give you worth. You give the job worth by your presence. The relationship doesn't validate you. You validate it by choosing to remain. Internalize that inversion, and the architecture of your dependence collapses. Every chain you ever wore was forged by the opposite belief that the title was honoring you. It never was. The deeper truth, you felt powerless in front of your boss, your clients, your partner, not because they were stronger, but because they sensed you needed the interaction more than they did. Need is a frequency. It broadcasts a micro-expression, a pause, the speed of a reply. The nervous system detects it. The moment your need becomes visible, the math is decided. They hold the leverage. You hold hope. And hope is the weakest currency on earth. This is the wisdom your culture hid, because a population that understands it becomes ungovernable. By the end of this, you'll possess the full framework, the mathematics of desire, the law of the open door, the architecture of financial and emotional autonomy, the stoic emperor, and the final conversion that turns total self-reliance into total command. You won't just understand detachment, you'll become it. The version of you that finishes this will look back at the one who started with something close to pity, because the person who can genuinely walk away is the only person in any room who was ever truly free. If these ideas resonate, hit subscribe for more top-tier content. Drop unmovable in the comments so I know you're ready. Let's dive in. Here is the first principle of Machiavelli's hidden curriculum, and it will reorganize the way you see every interaction for the rest of your life. Desire is not a feeling. Desire is a mathematical disclosure of where your psychological weight is located. The moment you want something, a person, a position, an outcome, your nervous system places a portion of your sovereignty inside that external object, and whoever controls that object now controls that portion of you. This is not poetry. This is the operating system of human power dynamics, and Machiavelli mapped it 5 centuries before behavioral psychology gave it a name. Think about the last time you wanted something badly. A reply to a message, a decision from a hiring manager, a specific reaction from someone you cared about. Notice what happened to your inner state. Your thoughts narrowed, your time perception distorted. Your behavior became performative. You began calculating, optimizing, rehearsing, and every one of those micro-adjustments was a small surrender of your authentic center. You stopped being. You started auditioning. And the universe, which mirrors with brutal accuracy, gave the position of power to the only party in that exchange who was not auditioning: them. This is the neurological logic of leverage. The person who wants less controls more. Not because they are colder, not because they are crueler, but because their psychological center of gravity is located inside themselves rather than projected outward into the situation. They are not waiting for the outcome to tell them who they are. You are, and that single difference, the location of your center, is the difference between commanding the room and quietly begging it for permission. Machiavelli observed this in the courts of Renaissance Italy, where princes, ambassadors, and merchants performed daily psychological combat under the veneer of civility. The ones who survived and ruled were never the ones with the most resources. They were the ones who could sit across from anyone and broadcast a single, unmistakable signal: I do not need this outcome. That signal, projected with calm, not with theater, collapsed the leverage of the other side instantly, because the moment your counterpart realizes you can walk, every threat they hold evaporates. Every implied consequence becomes ornamental. You have just become the only free agent in the room, and freedom in any negotiation is the apex currency. Now apply this to your life as it is right now. The boss who makes you anxious. What would change in that dynamic if your savings could carry you for 12 months? The client who speaks to you with that quiet condescension. What would your replies sound like if you had 3 other clients waiting? The person whose silence ruins your week. What would your composure look like if your inner world were genuinely complete without them? Notice how, in every scenario, your need is not really emotional. It is structural. It is a function of what you have not yet built inside yourself. Strategic thinking begins the second you stop blaming the other party and start auditing the architecture of your own dependence. Because they did not take your power, you leased it to them in exchange for the comfort of not having to build your own foundation. And here is where most people get permanently stuck. They try to fake the detachment. They post the quotes. They perform the indifference. They rehearse the cool replies. But the nervous system cannot be deceived. Your physiology will leak the truth in the timing of a glance, in the texture of your voice, in how quickly you fill a silence. Real detachment is not a performance. It is a structural condition, a life that has been engineered so that no single relationship, opportunity, or outcome can hold you hostage. Which brings us directly to the second principle, the one that quietly separates sovereign people from everyone else. Here is the principle that will sound paradoxical until the moment it becomes obvious, and then you will never see human relationships the same way again. The law of the open door states that true power is not the ability to keep people close. True power is the genuine, unbothered willingness to let anyone in your life leave at any time, without protest, without persuasion, without internal collapse. The door behind every person in your life must be open, not metaphorically, actually. And the second they sense the door is locked from your side, they will begin testing the lock, because human beings instinctively devalue what cannot escape them. Read that again. Human beings instinctively devalue what cannot escape them. This is not cynicism. This is one of the most reliable findings in social psychology, dressed up here in the language of self-mastery. Cialdini called it scarcity. Machiavelli understood it as the asymmetry of options. Whatever you cannot lose, you cannot fully respect. Whatever cannot walk away from you holds no leverage in your perception. And so the very act of clinging, the texts, the over-explanations, the strategic compromises designed to keep someone in your orbit, is the precise behavior that erodes the value you hold in their nervous system. You are not protecting the relationship. You are dismantling it, one anxious gesture at a time. Now invert this. Imagine being the person who genuinely, structurally, unmistakably does not need any single individual to remain, not because you are cold, not because you do not love, but because your inner architecture is so complete that the presence of others is a chosen luxury rather than a required oxygen. What happens to the energy in any room you enter? What happens to the texture of your voice? What happens to the pace of your replies? You become, in psychological terms, the unmovable center. And the unmovable center does not chase, does not panic, does not negotiate against itself. It simply exists, and the entire dynamic reorganizes around it. Machiavelli observed in The Prince that fortresses built on the loyalty of others are fragile because loyalty is a variable. Fortresses built on the sovereign capability of the ruler himself are durable because they require nothing external to stand. Translate that into your life. Every emotional fortress you have built on the continued presence of another person, a partner, a boss, a friend, a client, is structurally unstable because their presence is a variable you do not control. The only fortress that holds is the one built inside you, and the moment that fortress is real, you can leave every door in your life wide open, because nothing that walks out of it can take your foundation with it. This is the psychological trap that destroys 99% of people in their most important relationships and negotiations. They confuse holding on with caring. They confuse anxiety with love. They confuse compromise with maturity. But Machiavelli, with his cold, clinical clarity, would tell you that the moment you cannot walk away, you have already lost the thing you were trying to keep, because you no longer possess it. It possesses you. And the cure is not to care less. The cure is to build so much sovereign weight inside yourself that caring becomes a sovereign act, freely given rather than a desperate transaction made under emotional duress. So ask yourself honestly, in the silence behind your eyes, which doors in your life are you holding shut? Which person are you afraid to let walk through? Which opportunity are you gripping with both hands because letting go feels like falling? Identify them. Name them internally, because every locked door in your life is a leak in your inner sovereignty. And the next principle is how you seal those leaks permanently. You cannot perform what you have not built. This is the hard truth most motivational content will never give you, because the truth is unsexy and structural. Real detachment, the kind Machiavelli weaponized into political dominance and the Stoics refined into psychological invincibility, is not a mindset. It is an infrastructure. It is the cumulative result of dozens of unsexy, deliberate decisions you make over months and years to build a life that can survive the removal of any single person, paycheck, or position. The internal fortress is real estate, not affirmation. And until you understand this, every attempt at detachment will be theater. There are two load-bearing walls of this fortress, and you must build both. The first is financial autonomy, not wealth, but the structural condition of not requiring any specific income source to survive the next 12 months. The second is emotional autonomy, not isolation, but the structural condition of generating your own validation, identity, and meaning internally, so that no single relationship is responsible for your psychological equilibrium. When both walls are real, walking away is no longer a brave act. It is a casual one. And casual walking away is the most disorienting psychological weapon a sovereign mind can possess, because the people around you have spent their entire lives expecting you to flinch. Start with the financial wall, because it is the most measurable. Every dollar you save is not money. It is months of future composure. It is the number of meetings you can sit through without swallowing your real opinion. It is the number of clients you can decline without panic. It is the structural permission to tell the truth in rooms where lying has become a survival reflex. Most people misunderstand savings as a hedge against catastrophe. It is not. Savings are the literal mathematical purchase of your future capacity for honesty. Every month of runway is a month of sovereignty, and sovereignty accumulated becomes leverage. Now the emotional wall, which is harder to measure but more decisive. Emotional autonomy is built through deliberate, repeated experiences of being alone with yourself without collapsing into anxiety. It is built through the cultivation of internal practices, reading, training, contemplation, skill building, solitary mastery of something difficult, that generate a sense of self that is not dependent on a single relational mirror. Most people have outsourced their identity to the people around them. They know who they are only by the reflection coming back. Remove the mirror and the identity dissolves. The sovereign mind builds an identity that exists in the dark, with no one watching, generating its own light. That is the inner fortress, and it cannot be borrowed, performed, or rented. It must be constructed. Here is the part that will confront you. The reason you have been compromising your boundaries, your dignity, your real opinions is not weakness of character. It is weakness of structure. You did not lose the negotiation in the room. You lost it years earlier when you failed to build the financial and emotional architecture that would have allowed you to stand inside the room without fear. The Machiavellian truth is that composure is not a personality trait. It is a downstream consequence of preparation. The people you have envied for their calm authority did not inherit it. They engineered it. They built the fortress quietly, while everyone else was performing. So the strategic instruction is precise. Audit your life this week. Identify the 3 external dependencies that are currently extracting the highest cost from your inner sovereignty, financially, emotionally, or psychologically. And begin deliberately to reduce your structural reliance on each one. Not dramatically, not with announcement, quietly, architecturally, because the people who currently hold leverage over you are watching for theatrical rebellion, and they will adjust to suppress it. What they cannot adjust to is the slow, silent erosion of their position as you build, brick by brick, a life that no longer requires them. Now, we move from the external architecture into the deeper psychological work. The integration of the archetype that lives inside you and has been suppressed by every soft narrative you were raised on. Now, Carl Jung observed that the psyche contains a shadow, the disowned reservoir of every trait the social personality was forced to bury. For the betrayed intellectual, one of the most catastrophically suppressed shadow elements is the stoic emperor. The inner figure that does not need to be liked, the inner figure that can issue a verdict without apology. The inner figure that experiences the loss of an external object, a job, a relationship, an outcome, with the same metabolic neutrality as the loss of a passing cloud. You have buried this figure under decades of conditioning, and the cost of that burial is the precise quantity of powerlessness you currently feel. You were taught that the stoic emperor inside you was a danger, that his coldness was unkind, that his composure was arrogance, that his willingness to lose anything in order to remain himself was selfish. This was not moral instruction. This was a containment strategy, designed by a culture that needed your warmth more than it needed your sovereignty. And so you overdeveloped the accommodating part of your psyche, the diplomat, the giver, the perpetual negotiator, and you starved the part of you that could simply calmly say no and mean it without explanation. The result is what you experience now. A personality that performs warmth while seething with private resentment, because the stoic emperor inside you knows, with absolute clarity, that you have been giving away authority that was never anyone's to take. Shadow integration is not the indulgence of darkness. It is the controlled metabolization of suppressed strength back into the conscious self. You are not becoming a different person. You are becoming a more complete one. The Stoic Emperor does not replace your kindness. He protects it. He stands behind your warmth like a sovereign behind a diplomat, and his presence is what allows your warmth to become a chosen gift rather than a compulsive transaction. When the Emperor is integrated, your kindness becomes valuable again, because everyone in the room knows somehow that it is being extended by someone who could withdraw it at any moment. That is what gives generosity its weight. Without the Emperor behind it, generosity becomes currency. With the Emperor behind it, generosity becomes a sovereign gesture. Marcus Aurelius, who literally ruled an empire while remaining one of the most psychologically untouchable men in recorded history, wrote his private meditations not to manage others, but to manage the only territory that ever truly mattered, the inside of his own mind. He understood, exactly as Machiavelli understood, that the man who governs his own reactions has already won every external war before it begins. The Stoic Emperor is the part of you that governs your reactions. He is the part that hears the provocative comment and does not flinch, the part that receives the disappointing news and does not collapse, the part that watches the person walk away and remains internally exactly the same height. To integrate him, you must do something specific. You must give him a seat at the table of your daily life. You must consult him before sending the anxious reply, before accepting the invitation you do not want, before laughing at the joke you did not find funny, before performing the agreement you do not feel. Pause and ask the Emperor inside you what he would do, not the resentful, reactive version of him, the calm, sovereign version. He will tell you he has always been there, watching, waiting for you to finally listen. And the moment you begin consulting him, your behavior will subtly recalibrate, and the people around you will sense before you do that something inside you has changed. They will not be able to name it, but they will feel it, and the dynamic will adjust to it. This is the deep psychological dimension of inner sovereignty that the surface strategies cannot reach. You cannot manipulate yourself into detachment. You can only integrate the part of yourself that was already detached and let him stand up inside you and let his weight do the work that your performance was failing to do. The Stoic Emperor is not your enemy. He is your missing center. And the moment he is restored, the mathematics of desire begins to invert in your favor, because you no longer broadcast need. You broadcast sufficiency, and the world, which always mirrors the dominant frequency you transmit, begins to deliver itself to you in a way it never did when you were chasing it. Before we reveal the final conversion mechanism that turns total self-reliance into total command, you must understand the medium through which all of this is transmitted. It is not your words, it is not your strategy, it is not your titles, it is your composure. Composure is the broadcast frequency of inner sovereignty. It is the visible surface of the invisible fortress. And in any room, professional, personal, social, composure is the single most valuable currency in circulation, precisely because almost no one possesses it authentically. Most people perform it, the sovereign mind embodies it, and the difference is detectable within seconds by every nervous system in the room. Composure is not stillness. Composure is the calibrated absence of unnecessary reaction. The composed person does not respond to provocation with flatness. They respond with precision. They do not react to bait. They do not flinch at silence. They do not fill conversational pauses out of discomfort. They speak when speech serves the outcome, and they remain quiet when quiet serves the outcome, and they appear to everyone watching like a person whose internal weather is not affected by the external atmosphere. This is the visible signature of someone who needs nothing in the moment, and the room reads that signature instantly, even if no one can articulate what they are reading. Machiavelli observed that the prince must learn to appear certain virtues even when the situation does not naturally produce them. But the deeper teaching, the one most readers miss, is that the durable form of this appearance is not performance. It is the gradual, structural elimination of the internal conditions that produce reactive behavior. You do not learn to appear composed. You become a person who no longer has the internal scarcity that produces incomposure. The appearance is a byproduct, the infrastructure is the cause. And once the infrastructure is real, your composure becomes magnetic. Because in a world of reactive, anxious, performative people, the one person whose nervous system is genuinely settled becomes the gravitational center of every room they enter. This is where strategic thinking and emotional intelligence converge into a single skill. You begin to observe interactions as a kind of slow chess, where the prize is never the immediate exchange, but the long-term position of your psychological weight. You stop trying to win individual conversations and start playing for the structural position. You let small provocations pass because the composed person knows that responding to every provocation is the surest way to broadcast that you can be moved. You become, over months and years, a person who is essentially unprovocable. Not because you do not feel, but because your feelings no longer need to be performed for an audience to be real. And here is the leverage compounding effect that no one will warn you about. Every time you remain composed in a situation that previously would have unsettled you, your nervous system rewrites its own baseline. The threshold of what can disturb you rises. The duration of any disturbance shortens. The texture of your default state becomes flatter, steadier, deeper. Within a year of deliberate composure practice, you will not recognize the reactive version of yourself who used to lose entire days to a single comment, a single email, a single silence. That version of you will appear, in retrospect, like a person who had not yet learned that his reactions were the only territory he ever actually controlled. The sovereign mind reclaims that territory first, and from that territory governs everything else. Now we arrive at the principle that converts everything you have built. The mathematics of desire, the law of the open door, the internal fortress, the Stoic emperor, the architecture of composure, into raw, unmistakable leverage in the external world. This is the conversion most people never reach because they stop at detachment and treat it as the destination. Detachment is not the destination. Detachment is the precondition. The destination is the deliberate, strategic application of your self-sufficiency as the dominant force in every dynamic you enter. Walking away from need is the defensive move. Converting that walking away capacity into command is the offensive one. And Machiavelli, more than any thinker in recorded history, mapped this conversion with surgical clarity. Here is the mechanism. The moment your willingness to walk away is real, not performed, not theatrical, but structurally real. Every counterparty and every dynamic must now negotiate against a new variable. They are no longer negotiating with your need. They are negotiating with your indifference, and indifference, as a negotiating posture, is psychologically unanswerable. They cannot threaten what you do not require. They cannot withhold what you do not desire. They cannot punish what you do not fear losing. Every tool of soft coercion in their arsenal becomes inert in your presence. And in that vacuum, the only available response left to them is to offer better terms. Not because you demanded better terms, because your composure required them. This is the Machiavellian inversion of social power. Most people enter negotiations trying to demonstrate their value. The sovereign mind enters negotiations demonstrating his absence of need and lets the counterparty discover his value through the contrast. He does not lobby for the position. He simply makes clear through his composure that the position will be honored by his presence rather than the reverse. He does not chase the relationship. He simply makes clear through his open door that the relationship is a chosen luxury for both parties. He does not beg for respect. He embodies the structural conditions under which respect is the only available response. The conversion happens automatically because the human nervous system is wired to mirror sufficiency the same way it mirrors need. Apply this concretely in the next professional interaction where you would historically have over-explained "do not." Let the silence stretch. In the next personal interaction where you would historically have softened your real position, do not. Let the position stand. In the next moment where you would historically have followed up out of anxiety, do not. Let the absence speak. You will feel in the first hours a withdrawal sensation, because your nervous system has been addicted to the dopamine of need resolution for so long that its absence will feel like loss. Sit with the sensation. Do not act on it. Within days, you will notice the dynamic begin to invert. The reply will come, the offer will improve, the respect will recalibrate. Not always, but often enough that you will begin to understand, viscerally, that you have been the one creating the unfavorable terms of your own life by broadcasting need where you should have been broadcasting sufficiency. And here is the long-term vision, the one you must let yourself see clearly, because it is the future that is mathematically available to you the moment you commit to this architecture. Imagine a version of your life, 18 months from now, in which no single client, employer, partner, or opportunity can extract a compromise from you that violates your real position. Imagine entering every room with the quiet structural knowledge that you can leave it without consequence. Imagine the calm in your voice, the precision of your replies, the way people lean slightly toward you when you speak, because your composure has become a kind of gravity. That version of you is not a fantasy. That version of you is the inevitable downstream consequence of the principles you have just received, applied with patience, applied with structure, applied with the cold, sovereign clarity of a person who has finally understood that the mind that needs nothing commands everything. You will know the conversion has begun when you find yourself, for the first time in years, telling the truth in a room where you previously would have performed. When you decline an opportunity that would have flattered the old version of you. When you let a silence sit that would have once broken you. When you walk away from a dynamic that no longer serves you, and you walk away without explanation, without apology, without the need for the other party to validate your departure. That is the moment inner sovereignty stops being a concept and becomes your operating state. And from that operating state, every external outcome in your life begins slowly and irreversibly to reorganize itself around your new center of gravity. So here is what you take from this. You have not been powerless. You have been structurally dependent in places you could have been structurally sovereign. The compromises you made were not failures of character. They were failures of preparation, and preparation is something you begin today, in silence, without announcement, without permission. Build the financial wall. Build the emotional wall. Consult the Stoic Emperor before every reactive decision. Practice composure as a discipline, not a mood. Let the doors in your life stand open. And watch over the next months as the people who once held leverage over you begin to sense, without being able to name it, that the dynamic between you has changed permanently because the person they were negotiating with no longer exists. In his place stands someone who needs nothing, fears nothing, chases nothing, and therefore, by the oldest law of human power, commands everything. If this resonated with the part of you that has been waiting for permission to finally stand still and let the world come to you, drop the word unmovable in the comments below. Let it be your declaration, your private signature, the first public marker of the version of you that is no longer available for compromise. Make it the line in the sand. Make it the moment the old self ends and the sovereign one begins. And if you are ready to stop bending, stop chasing, stop performing need in rooms that were designed to extract it from you, subscribe. This is the only place where Machiavellian strategic thinking, Jungian shadow integration, and the deep psychology of inner sovereignty are translated into a practical architecture for the modern, betrayed intellectual. Every video is another brick in the fortress. Every revelation is another door you can finally let stand open. You are not here by accident. You are here because the part of you that refuses to be exploited any longer has finally found the room where the real conversation is happening. And whatever you do, don't stop now. The on-screen video matters more than you think. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. I'll see you there. See what others miss, know what others fear, become who others can't.